Unless you've been living under a rock, you already know AI is completely changing the way that we all write code. This has been a thing that's been going on for a few years, but now even the last few weeks, agents have changed everything. We can write code faster than ever before, but we don't always have, as the speed goes up, a great grip on quality. This is something that we've had to deal with a lot at Flowglad. We've developed a 6-layer method of attack for how to solve this, and it's produced really great results for us. So the first layer is syntax. Obviously, the models today are really good at writing TypeScript, Rust, whatever, any programming language they've gotten really good at. And then layer 2 is where it starts to get interesting, is the idioms. So every language has its own idioms. In TypeScript, for example, it's technically grammatically correct TypeScript to cast an object or a variable or value as any, but it completely defeats the purpose of the type system. So when we see any in TypeScript, it's kind of like a swear word. There's a lot of stuff that you can do here with linters. They help enforce language-specific idioms. They are great because there are ways in which maybe an agent will try to just get the job done. And then linters will say, whoa, hey, hold up. You're not done yet because you used a swear word in your code. That off-the-shelf linter approach is great for language idioms. Every code base also has its own specific idioms. As the code base grows, these are the types of things where it's like, hey, we don't really do that this way here. The same way every family has its own little like vernacular, like nicknames or shorthand. Every code base has them as well. The challenge though with AI is that AI doesn't have the context on your code base's idioms. And oftentimes the patterns in your code base may not actually even be sufficient for the AI to like think about what it should do when it's adding new code to your code base. So if you have like an agent is trained on a bunch of like crappy sample code, but it's available like out in the public internet, and then you have code in your code base that maybe is more meticulous or more anal or whatever it is, it's going to be really annoying, honestly, dealing with the AI messing that up every time. So for these code base specific idioms, this is where Biome really shines. So Biome has this like approach to plugins where they use GritQL, which is an AST like searching tool that you can use to basically very trivially write your own custom plugins. This allows you to define basically your own swear words that you can check for in your pre-commit hooks. What's so powerful about this is that there are certain things that, you know, might have come up in code review that you can actually now write just like a linter for to be like, hey, don't do that. And some examples in our code base are like, we realized that in test coverage, to be defined is a really weak assertion. And models oftentimes love to just be like, yeah, we're gonna like assert that this thing is defined and like that's sufficient test coverage. We actually now have a linter that we wrote, basically like one-shotted it with Claude, that makes it so that to be defined will actually throw an error. This catches many cases that AI would have like committed on its own. It just says like, hey, don't use to be defined. Use the error literally says, use a more precise assertion or more precise assertions. And the net result of this is without any new keystrokes from the humans or any review in the PR stage, we just get better tests in the pull requests. Another example, though, is code review agents. So code review agents are like a great place to also enforce certain code base idioms if you're not able to capture the idioms in like an AST regex. Our personal favorite one is cubic.dev. We've also recently added CodeRabbit. It's been good. We like having multiple review agents in the mix because what we found is that agent review is very similar to human review in the sense that like it's good to have multiple agents go through multiple rounds of review of the code because they'll catch things sometimes that the others didn't. So that redundancy is really nice. All right, so that's idioms. Just use linters, use review agents, write your own custom linter rules. It is trivial to do. All right, so now layer 3 is about logic and runtime bugs. These are a little bit fun, honestly, because the act of solving them actually is like, this is where you take the superpower that AI gives you and really point it at like the right problem. Here's the core tension. The cost of producing a single line of code has gone to zero, but the cost of maintaining that code over time, if anything, it's actually kind of gone up. And here's what I mean by that. The maintenance cost of code oftentimes is how difficult it's going to be for that code to interact with all the future code that's going to build on top of it or depend on it. And if all future code is getting produced at a faster and faster clip, any given line of code's cost of maintenance is actually probably going to be a little bit higher than it was before AI. This is where tests become godsend. Tests are incredible. They've always been amazing. The only reason that they were even a controversial question, in my opinion at least, was that it wasn't normal for us to have the resources economically to write the test coverage that our code needed. So as a result, up until very recently, it was pretty normal for you to be at a startup that had like terrible test coverage, right? Because everybody is in a rush to ship new features, and writing coverage of your existing code is in total trade-off with the time that you could be spending writing new features. AI kind of flips the economics here, because if you ship a bunch of code, but you don't have great test coverage on it, then you're gonna start building on top of your trash island. And slowly, as more and more mass builds on that trash island, and there are subtle bugs or performance issues or things like this, over time, that trash island is just going to compact and like sink into the ocean. And everything that you've built up on top of it is going to sink with it. Tests basically harden your trash island, and they make it more like igneous rock. In Flowglad's code base, the vast majority of our code is test coverage. Why? Because AI will tirelessly write as much test coverage as you want it to write. Oftentimes, it's actually better to test the shit out of something than it is to just like move on to the next thing. So we don't just like test like our top level functions. We test the functions those functions use. We test the functions that those functions use. We test like our API generation, our RLS policies, how we handle authentication, you name it, right? But tests are not the only tool here. Other part is types become really powerful at making it hard to write logic bugs, because if you have a really maniacally enforced type system, you can just let the types keep you from getting into trouble. Zod has been great for this for us. We've also found that, you know, things like TRPC, like any basically library that helps you type assurances, really good type assurances, it's like worth its weight in gold. And I think that that's like extra true when you are trying to move quickly with AI, because the types basically make it so that AI gets a really tight feedback loop as to where it messed up. And then it also makes it so that you as the human know that as the type check passes and the test pass, it's probably good to go. Another big unlock for us was that rather than leaning just on types or just on tests, they actually like together really well. If there's a guarantee that you want to enforce at runtime, if you can encode that in the type system, for example, like if a checkout session is of type product, it's going to need to have a product ID. Or if like, let's say a fee calculation is ready to go, it's going to need to have a billing address. Things like this, super easy to use something like Zod to enforce at runtime, but then also get that enforcement in the type system. But then there's like other stuff where there's like weird branching logic, right? That you're going to have to think about that you can't really like just put into the types very easily. That's where tests come to the rescue. So having a clear outlook on where you're going to rely on types versus where you're going to rely on tests is going to make it so that you have really strong types and also have test coverage in all the places that types can't save you. Finally, on the logic and runtime bugs question, this is a great place to flag CI/CD. My take is that probably everybody who is watching this is not investing enough in their CI/CD. We spend maybe, I don't know, 6% of our time thinking through how we can make our CI/CD better. And I think that we could probably even stand to spend a little bit more. What's incredible about CI/CD is that it allows you to basically computerize your bureaucracy. So all the checks that you would want to pass, all the sort of ways that you would want to ensure that things are like exhaustively correct, you can just encode that in CI/CD workflows and then they run. From our perspective, we think they're more important in an era of AI because all the things that you're looking for, you might have noticed in this entire video, like so far, everything that we're talking about is essentially just the stuff that you need to be able to shut your brain off while moving as fast as humanly possible. That's all it is. Way harder to do that with poor CI/CD infrastructure without having things encoded or workflows automated than with them. So that's kind of the big three for logic bugs. Get really good at writing tests and good test infrastructure. Add linter rules so that you have as many sort of swear word definitions in what your tests should look like, so that way AI can just like self-correct to write better tests without even you having to ask it to. Third is use the type system. And we like to reach for the type system first, and then for anything that the type system can't cover, that's when we bring the tests in. And then finally, obviously, the CI/CD. All right, so now layer 4. This is actually like part where we're now stepping out the automated correctness checks, right? So like you can sort of verify in an automated way through type checking, through compilation, through linting, and through test coverage. You can verify in CI/CD that the code is correct, but you can't verify that the code is teleologically correct. You can't verify that when presented between two different directions that you could implement, the right one was selected. Why? These are not things that you can automate easily because they're very human questions. These are questions of design. The challenge here is how do we make it so that we can move crazy fast using AI with as much of an alignment with our intent as possible? The challenge basically boils down to the fact that like AI will suddenly misunderstand what you want it to do. Even the really smart models have this problem, and the problem basically boils down to the fact that an infinitely smart model still can't read your mind. So how do you actually arrive at a meeting of the mind, as they say in contract law, a meeting of the minds between your thinking or what you meant when you said you wanted the feature implemented this way and what the AI understands you to mean? There's this format, this document that we've been using called a game plan at Flowglad, and it's been really helpful for this. So what a game plan is, it's a structured markdown file that basically makes it so that you can ask the AI to articulate everything that it understands of the current state of that part of the code base you want to extend, the changes that you want it to make, even down to like function signatures of like, what are the types going to look like? What types is this function or these functions going to accept? What types are they going to return? And then finally, how that work is going to be chunked into pull requests and how those pull requests are going to run in a parallelizable way. We'll also share a link, beneath wherever you're watching this video, where you can get the prompt that we use to generate our game plans. This thing is crazy, crazy powerful. It makes it so that you don't need to go back and forth with the AI and are limited by basically like how much you can sort of describe in one text area or one plan mode. Instead, you describe almost like the sequence of changes that you want to make. It will figure out how to coordinate them. And then once you're happy with that document, it's almost like the pull request before the pull request. It becomes really easy to just feed it to the AI and say, implement PR number 1 or implement PR number 2. This, by the way, is really powerful for multiplayer understanding. So if you have this game plan that helps you and all the future agents that are going to work on it get on the same page about what you're going to do and how that work is going to be executed, you now can share that game plan once you're happy with it with your teammates, your human teammates, and they can review it and they can provide any feedback and see if there's anything that you and your agent missed. And once you guys are all on the same page, now the whole team knows with full confidence what we're going to do and how the PRs are going to land. The unlock here is that it speeds up the review process. So like another thing that basically has become clear in like how you eradicate AI slop so that you can continue moving as fast as possible is that first you need to solve the problem of formal verification of correctness. Just lean on it. Automate the correctness process as much as you can. Use that to your advantage. Now that you know each individual line of code works as intended, the next part is how do you arrive understanding so that you can speed up the review process. Game plans are phenomenal for this because they almost like give everyone who reads a game plan a preview of what the pull requests are going to look like, and it'll be much easier for them to review them. Everyone, including other AI agents, because now the game plan is this document that is a human can understand it, a future agent can understand it, a human can read it and then review pull requests made by an agent can understand it and use it to review the same pull request. This kind of like leads us now to the final layer, which is understanding across time. So you've got sort of like the design decisions and understanding between you and your agent. You've got the multiplayer understanding where there's like other humans that need to understand this work and probably other agents who are going to be reviewing it. And then the final layer, understanding across time. How do you develop a clear understanding of what this code base is and where it's headed and how it works? Well, for one, what we found is that the game plan documents are things that you should keep. You shouldn't throw them away because they help provide this like library of all the decisions that were made in your code base over time, why they were made the way they were made, what problems they were seeking to address. And as that list grows, or as that like sort of corpus grows, you'll be able to refer back to it. You'll also be able to understand, for example, why code was structured in a certain way. One other thing here is that now code comments have become cheap, doc strings have become cheap, and those things actually if anything, decrease the cost of maintenance of a line of code. So you should take advantage of the fact that not all lines of code are created equal, and some of them actually can decrease the cost of maintenance of others. So at Flowglad, for example, we try to have heavy code documentation of all of our tests and all of our functions because they allow us to understand the intent, right? So for example, if there's a regression in a test that was written 4 months ago and we don't remember why it was that we wrote it that way, a well-written name of the test rather than it should handle the happy path correctly, if it's more descriptive than that, you now have the first sort of place that you can use to triangulate what it was this test was intending to verify. And then if you add throughout the test code comments explaining sort of the transforms and stuff, one, it makes it easier for future AI to like quickly skim and have a documentation layer of the code that was written. Sometimes it's very easy for like more complex stuff to just be like kind of a little bit harder to interpret. But then two is that it helps humans also understand that the right thing was being tested. So documentation seems to be one of the biggest things that helps understanding across time. But also honestly, like the truth is we're still early in this. So not that much time has passed. We don't know necessarily for sure whether or not the abstractions we're shipping or code bases that we're shipping overwhelmingly with AI are going to age gracefully. But we do know gracefully aging code tends to look like. So again, if you build out all this infrastructure to eradicate slop at the line of code level, and then at the file level, and then at the pull request level, it's very likely that you're probably going to end up eradicating slop at the code base level. And that's kind of the holy grail. It wasn't possible before for the average engineering team or the average engineer to pull this off, but it is now. So it may actually be the case that if we use AI right, we're going to be writing not just more code, not just faster, but we're also going to be writing it better, which is super exciting. Thank you.